Hello and welcome to Uncommon Law, my podcast about true stories from my life experience of over 50 years as a lawyer and trial judge. This is a look at the law from the inside out, stuff they don't teach in law school. This is Judge Rudy Greco, retired Justice of the New York State Supreme Court. In the United States, virtually every criminal defendant has a right to a trial by a jury of his peers or her peers. And it rarely happens because the justice system is so slow and ponderous, and maybe 3 or 4% of all the criminals charged ever get to a jury trial. But justice is very, very slow. But not this case. In this case, justice and jury trial were very swift, and that's what this is all about. When I first started as a defense attorney, as a young lawyer, I signed up to be an 18B counsel. 18B refers to New York State County Law, Section 18B, which basically was the means by which private counsel could volunteer to do public defender work at a reduced rate. And I didn't really need the reduced rate, although the money didn't hurt. I was a beginning lawyer. It was more so for the experience. And I had some good experiences. I didn't stay long at it because I didn't like being assigned counsel with no choice in picking my clients. But in any event, one of the earliest cases I got a phone call from the administrator of the 18B program and said, you should go right across the street and put in a notice of appearance, registering as the attorney for this young guy who's arrested on burglary charges, felony burglary charges, and he's going to be arraigned this afternoon if you can get over there and represent him at the arraignment where they present the charges formally against him in the courtroom. So I said, okay, I'll take the assignment. I was in Kew Gardens, and the criminal court was literally across Queens Boulevard, just across the street from my office. So I hurried across the street and went to the arraignment part, which is very, very busy. It's like Times Square there. New York courts are all loaded up all the time with lots of action. And there were two assistant district attorneys in the part representing the prosecution. And I approached the one who wasn't talking, and I told him I'm here. I'm going to represent Jaime, such and such. And here's my notice of appearance, and I filed it with the clerk, so he knew I was officially representing the guy. He said, sure. I said, what have you got on this? And he pulled the guy's file, Jaime's file, and he came out with a complaint and Jaime's yellow sheet, which was what we call in New York colloquialism. It was a yellow sheet because it's printed on yellow paper. It's his arrest record. And the complaint basically was summarized in very terse terms because everybody's in a hurry in the arraignment part. There's so much pressure because of the volume of work. And the assistant district attorney explained, he said, look, you guys being charged with felony burglary. He says he broke into the window of a storefront and was passing out the contents of the window when he was arrested. And to his misfortune, he says, this is 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. He says, we had two undercover cops in an unmarked car on a drug surveillance detail. Had nothing to do with these two guys. And they were 15 feet away from these two characters breaking the window of, it was a Woolworths 5 and 10. He says, and they couldn't believe their eyes. These guys, he says, the perpetrators didn't see the cops, and the cops couldn't believe that they couldn't see them because they were right nearby, and they saw this whole thing unfold before their very eyes, and they made a felony arrest. It was probably the easiest collar they ever made in their lives. They walked 15 feet with their guns drawn, and they arrested these two mopes and took them away. He said, the guy's got a long sheet, and that long sheet, mostly the small petty stuff. He says, but he has 2 felony convictions. So 2 prior felony convictions. He said if he gets convicted a third time, he's now a multiple felony offender, which means the minimum jail time he can get, and it's a minimum, is 15 years because he's a 3-time loser. He said, I can't believe these guys were doing this for, what they were doing. And I thought to myself, well, the biggest crime they committed, and I think the DA agreed with me because I made this remark, I said the biggest crime they committed was violating the old law of the street. Is if you're going to steal, steal big. These guys were passing stuff from a 5 and 10 window. It turns out what they were passing out were 6 packs of jockey underwear. It was unbelievable that they would commit a felony for 6 packs of jockey underwear. How many of them can you carry, and how much are they worth? So anyway, I knew this was not boding well for the intelligence of my future client here. So the DA said, "Look," he said, "let's face it. These guys are not harmful guys. They're not violent. They didn't do anything. They probably look at the record of these guys, and the record was extensive. He said they're not a danger to anybody in the public, and he said they're probably their own worst enemies." He said, "I'll give you a good deal, and the deal would be up to 1 year in jail. We'll charge them with a misdemeanor. They'll plead to a misdemeanor, which means that they can get up to 1 year in jail, probably serve about 9 months of that year." He said, "and I think that's a pretty good deal." And the reason why he offered that deal was apparent to myself and him. We both knew the same thing as everybody does in the criminal courts. The United States criminal courts are overcrowded with cases, and the jails are overcrowded with people, many of whom really don't belong in jail. They've done stupid things, drug stuff, minor drug stuff, and silly stuff, and they really don't belong in jail. They didn't have bail or anything else. And so the jails are very, very crowded. It's very expensive to maintain a prisoner in jail for the taxpayers. It's very, very expensive. And so the prosecutors all across the country, New York was no different, would tend to go easier and offer a good deal to lesser criminals just to get them out of the system so they wouldn't, and so they leave room for the prosecutors to concentrate on the dangerous people, the violent people, and who are actually a real threat to society. So I knew the deal was very, very good. I mean, I can add and subtract the difference between 15 and 1, and I knew it was good. And as the DA said, this was right before the eyes of the cops. He said, "This case is all locked up. There's no problem here." He said, "These guys are going to get convicted if they go to trial." And I knew he was right. So the next thing I had to do is to go in and talk to Jaime. And I got out of there quickly before the DA changed his mind because I thought the deal was pretty good. So I go into the holding pen, and the holding pens behind every criminal courtroom is a holding pen where defendants that have been arrested and are incarcerated and haven't made bail or about to face a judge to be arraigned or anything like that, they're held so that they're very handy and they can be produced in conveyor belt fashion, and then taken into the part of the court, which is right through a doorway, and they're held in the jail cell. And I go back there, and there's about 20 of them in there waiting, and they're all sullen, hanging around, a real, motley crew. And I call out, "Who's Jaime? Jaime, get up here." That's me. And up comes this 4'11" little guy with an attitude. He's going to show off I guess he had to be, a tough guy, Hollywood gangster attitude. I guess, 4'11" in the jail, you better be tough, because you'll be a victim. And he comes up, he goes, "You my lawyer?" "Yeah, I'm the tooth fairy. I came to give you the 50 cents I owe you, I said, "I want to disarm this jerk right away, And so that was my round. Everybody starts laughing at Jaime. But I smiled to let him off the hook, his macho was at stake here. And he, very cagey, he picked up, he smiled too, and he laughed. So we all laughed, and we said, "Okay, let's get down to business." And this way it wasn't an insult to him. But he got the message that he wasn't going to fool around with me, and I wasn't going to take nonsense, and you do that right away. And he gives me this tough guy. He still continues, but in a nicer tone of voice. He says, I ain't taking any pleas. I didn't do nothing. I'm innocent. These white guys, these cops, these white boys, they flaked me. They set me up because I was minding my own business, and I'm Puerto Rican, and they was picking on me, and I'm there minding my own business." I said, "Oh man!" So I knew I had to challenge him right away, and I said, "Don't be stupid, sucker!" And I called him out in front of all other guys that his peers there that are standing around, and I'm a street guy, and where I come from, if a guy throws his best at you, the best thing you can do is come right back with your best, and hopefully you can outwill him. And they call this in street parlance and in boxing. The Latin fans notice they call this process taking the other guy's heart. Basically it's outwilling him. And I knew that's what I had to do to save this guy from himself because he's an idiot. So I said, okay. I said, let's talk. I said, you don't want to take a plea. I said, they're offering you up to 1 year in jail. You cop to a misdemeanor, a misdemeanor, and you're going to be up to 1 year in jail. You probably do 9 months. You're a multiple felony offender, and you're going to face, if you're convicted, 15 years minimum. 15 years. I said, I don't know if you can do the math. I could do the math. You'd be stupid to turn this down because the cops were witnesses here, and they saw you do this. They had undercovers there on another drug deal that they were watching, and you and your partner here, just walked in and did what you had to do. You broke the window of this 5 and 10, and they caught you in the window handing out 6 packs of underwear. I said, no, I ain't copping. I was flaked at this, that, and the other thing. I says, no, I tell you what we do. How about this? Okay, you want to go to trial? You want to do this? Okay, and to me, that's idiotic. I said, but I'll tell you what. How about let's have a trial right here in the pen, okay? I'll be the prosecutor. I'll read the charges, and I'll testify on behalf of the cops, the 2 white boy cops, okay? And I'll do the testimony, and then you can give us your testimony and as to what happened and why you think you're innocent, and we'll let the jurors decide what's going on. Oh, got a big reception from all the boys in the band there. Everybody, they were loving this. They had nothing to do. It's the dullest thing in the world, standing around or sitting around in a holding pen. And here they were going to have a trial. This was theater and drama. So these guys were enjoying themselves. Oh yeah, let's do it. So Jaime now he's trapped by public opinion in the pens there, and he says, all right, go ahead. So. First thing I do is I take out the complaint, and I read the complaint and said the 2 defendants were observed breaking the window of Woolworths 5 and 10 at 61st Street and Woodside and Roosevelt Avenue at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning. And the one defendant, Jaime, such and such, was in the process of passing 6 packs of jockey underwear out to his accomplice when all witnessed by the cops who were on the surveillance, who then just stepped forward and apprehended these 2 people in the act. And then I did the testimony of the cops, and I made the cops, I said, and by the way, for a little dramatic effect, I says, these guys are going to look like altar boys. I didn't know what they looked like. They could be surly guys for all I knew. They were undercover cops, but I dressed them up like, in the imagination of the jurors, the so-called jurors, as clean-cut white boys with the suits and ties and short haircuts and looking scrubbed clean and everything else, and basically altar boys. And I reiterated in brief the cop's testimony. And I said, okay, so now you're the defendant, Jaime. You tell us your story. He goes, I was walking down the street, minding my business with my friend, and all of a sudden, for no reason whatsoever, no reason at all, these 2 guys, come and busted us for felony burglary, and I didn't do nothing. And I was minding my own business. I said, really? And the jury started laughing. I said, okay, hold it, fellas. Hang it. Let's keep it down. Let's not get carried away. Jaime, that's your testimony? Yeah, that's it. I got flaked. I didn't do nothing. I'm innocent. I ain't taking no pleas. I said, all right. I tell you what. I said, now it's time for cross-examination, okay? We're going to cross-examine you, like the DA is going to do. I said, so I'm going to ask you questions, and you give your answers, all right? Yeah, I know. I know what to do, man. I've been in a lot of courtrooms. I said, good. All right, Jaime, what time of the day were you arrested? He goes, 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, okay. Question, where do you live? He goes, I live in Spanish Harlem. I says, okay, uptown, right? Yeah. I said, and where were you arrested? In Queens. I said, were you arrested at 61st Street and Roosevelt Avenue? I don't know if that's what the complaint says. I guess so. Yeah, in Queens. I said, what time of the day was it? He said, about 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, what were you doing in Queens at 3 o'clock in the morning at 61st Street and Roosevelt Avenue? He says, I was on my way to see my old lady, my ex-wife. I says, you're going to see your old lady, ex-wife at 3 o'clock in the morning with your friend, right? Yeah, right. I said, and where does she live? She live in Corona. I says, where in Corona? He goes, 108th Street. I says, 108th Street station is 7 stops away from 61st Street station where you get off. How do you explain that? Oh, that's easy. He says, I could explain that. I can't read, man. Everybody knows. I didn't know how to read, and I came off at the wrong station. I got off at the wrong station. Now the whole audience and the jurors are breaking into, loud and unmistakable laughter. They can't believe there is this idiot is testifying in this way. I said, okay, gentlemen of the jury, you've heard all the evidence now in this case, and the time has come for you to render your verdict. Please indicate your verdict by thumbs up for innocent and acquittal or thumbs down for conviction. What will your verdict be? And it was unanimous. I looked back. I said, Jaime, turn around. It was instantaneous. It didn't take a split second. There were 19 guys with their thumbs down. I says, Jaime, turn around and look at the verdict. And he looks at the verdict, turns around immediately, goes, okay, man, I'll cop. I'll take the year. He goes, but, he wanted to save face, of course, but I ain't taking any more than a year. You understand? Don't come back with something more than a year. I said, no, Jaime, it's going to be a year. So I got out and I informed the district attorney, we have an agreement here. I said, this case is going to go away. He did a good job. He says, all right, I think that was the wise thing. I says, absolutely, I agree. And so, justice is where you find it, and usually there's an old saying in criminal court, you're looking for justice, you can find it under J in the dictionary, but in this case, the justice was found, and it wasn't long in coming, and it wasn't found in the courtroom, but it was found back in the pens behind the courtroom. Thanks for listening. Come back next week for another episode of Uncommon Law, lessons they don't teach in law school. I'm Judge Rudy Greco. Court is adjourned.